Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new segment that we're going to be doing, The Man in the Movies. Today I'm with Caspian. Say hello, Caspian.
Hello, Caspian.
Literalist.
Always, always.
So, what we're going to do in this section is we're going to talk to each of the guys and maybe some other people that may not join us for the rest of the show. And we're just going to talk about male characters in movies that have inspired us. For each of us, when we watch movies, because we love movies, we're all a bunch of movie buffs. We watch movies, we latch on to characters. They can be either the main character, stereotypical for Jeb, or uh, we may latch onto a character that's only in the movie for like 5 minutes, but we see a quality that's like,
Hmm.
that's the kind of man I want to be. And so today, I'm going to be talking with Sir Caspian here about one of his favorite characters. So, before we get into the movie and the character, uh, let's say, because our audience hasn't quite met you yet, Caspian's going to be with us for the Dark Knight episode that we're going to do pretty soon.
Hmm.
Um,
Still really excited for that.
I know I'm pumped. But Caspian has not quite met y'all yet, so let's get you a little bit of an introduction. If somebody were to just meet you and start talking to you, what are three things that you would expect them to know about you by the time that conversation's over?
I love music. Like probably first and foremost, I love music a lot. Like pretty much all and any kind of music, with the caveat of maybe rap. But even then, there are still songs like that I still like to listen to. But yeah, huge, absurd music fan. I love buying vinyls too, specifically. I mean, I'm a believer. That's probably the first thing that they would actually get from any conversation and things like that. And I love movies, man. Like I adore movies and TV shows. Like that's like my biggest thing. That was the way that I like grew up spending a lot of time with my parents as we watched TV shows. We always went to the movies. And so I just have a natural love for movies and movie theaters specifically because it's just a unique experience to get to go and sit in a room full of other people who are watching something for the first time. But yeah, those are probably the three biggest things.
Yeah, and for the music thing for the audience, one of we went to the same college, and one of the things that was I don't remember if it was started in my freshman year, but
Hmm.
it certainly became more popular. Was we had a singing competition that we started to do, and Caspian won one of those years, and probably one of the biggest highlights. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this was your return the next year for star performance. You sang the Little Sebastian song, and
Yeah,
that was the craze of the school for the rest of the year.
that was so much fun. Yeah, 5,000 Candles in the Wind. First of all, it's the best title ever. And yeah, for those who don't know what we're talking about, that's the song that Andy Dwyer, Chris Pratt's character from Parks and Rec, wrote for the mini horse Little Sebastian. And I was like, if I'm gonna have to come back and do this, like do a song and perform again, like I'm gonna make it something just absurd, but something that hopefully and like so many people knew that song more than I was expecting, because I remember talking to Matt Webb before I did the song. I was like, hey, do you watch Parks and Rec? He was like, yeah. I was like, do you know the song 5,000 Candles? He was like, yeah. I was like, he was so much more excited about it than I was expecting. I was like, okay, good. I've made the right choice. But yeah, that was a lot of fun.
It was indeed. All right, so speaking of excitement, I got very excited when you told me about the man in the movies that you picked. So go ahead, fill us in on the movie and the character.
So, movie is A Quiet Place, written, directed, co-written but directed by John Krasinski, who is phenomenal, just actor, director, writer overall. Like the span of time from The Office to where he is now, like he's done so much. I mean, not even just A Quiet Place, but being Jack Ryan in the TV series, being in 13 Hours, all these other films that he's done. This one specifically, though, first movie that he wrote and directed, and it's phenomenal. I mean, apart from it being a horror movie, and I love horror movies, I love good horror movies. This one was just so unique in the fact that it's a family movie.
Yeah,
Like this is a movie specifically about family and overcoming, trauma and trials to try and survive. And then in the background, this is also a horror movie about aliens and stuff like that coming and like attacking the world and having to basically survive by being quiet because, making loud noises can attract them. Like not even loud noises, just noises in general can attract them to you. And John's character, Lee Abbott, is the father in the family. And the whole movie is really about more his children than he and his wife, but he is on screen a lot of the time, and you really get to experience kind of his mentality and the way that he is trying to keep them all safe and the struggles they've gone through while trying to do that. And it's a lot for the character that I'm sure we'll talk about at some point,
Yeah,
but it's a phenomenal character played by a phenomenal actor, and I really love the movie.
I agree, and I think it was one of the most unique horror movies that was
Hmm.
one of the most unique movies that's made period in a long time.
Yeah.
You see, like we've heard the rumblings of the coming demise of the of the movie theater industry. How
Yeah.
and we've heard about that coming for a while, and we kind of see it
Hmm.
sometimes. We don't go out to see movies very often. However, when a
Yeah.
good movie like that comes out, people
Hmm.
flood the theaters, and that's exactly what
Yeah.
happened with this. And there was another movie recent.
Hmm.
Top Gun Maverick did the same thing. When a good
Yeah.
movie comes out that's not pandering to an overseas audience, it's made to be
Yep.
a good movie that people in
Yep.
America actually want to see. The theaters are full, and that was
Yeah.
that. The Quiet Place was really the one that just kind of like shook the system again, and is like, oh, this can still work. We just have to,
Hmm.
make good movies.
Yeah, it was one of those like surprising gems of the year because I remember seeing the trailer for it and going, "Oh, I like these actors." And obviously John Krasinski and Emily Blunt are married in real life. They have
So cute.
phenomenal chemistry on screen together, which really sells the characters even more. But like, it's one of those things where I was like, "I'll go see this because I like horror movies and this looks unique." And it turned out to be something that was so unexpectedly pleasant to watch. Because like, you see a lot of horror movies and they're just kind of like, yeah, this was just kind of put out to be a jump scare gotcha film. But this one actually had a lot of like real heart and real character development, and the writing was just so solid for it. It was such a surprisingly nice experience to get to watch it. And it's nice that we still have movies like that because, yeah, like you said, the movie industry with theaters and everything really felt like it was dying during COVID, especially because nobody went to theaters. I mean, nobody could go to theaters for a long time, and then you had the whole movies being released on like HBO Max and Disney Plus and in theaters, and people still didn't want to go out. And then you had people finally committing to, we're just going to release this in theaters again. And it was nice to see that, like, yeah, no, I've been to see multiple movies on their release dates on their premiere nights, and the theaters are full. People are still going back out because, people still like that experience of watching something new with a group of other people who haven't seen it because it's just such a unique experience. And this movie was a lot of fun for that too.
It was what part of what I love about it. It wasn't made to be a franchise. It was made to be
Hmm.
we're going to make a good movie and then we're going to
Yeah.
move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
But then uh, when the uh, when the production company like really was trying to pressure John Krasinski into making it, he's like, all right, if we're gonna make a sequel, if a sequel is gonna be made, whether I'm in
Hmm.
it or not, I'm gonna be in it because I'm gonna make sure it's done well. And then the second one comes
Yeah.
out, and it's a
Yep.
spectacular sequel as well. Now we're just
Yeah.
yeah. This sorry, this is one of the things I'm kind of nerdy about this series.
No, I understand. And this, I went. I don't remember if I went and saw the second movie in theater. I think I did. I think I did.
Mhm.
But I know I've seen it, and again, it's another just really good movie. Again, another movie that's based more around the idea of family and community than around the monster itself. It's, the horror kind of takes a back seat
Yeah,
to what the actual story is trying to convey. And also, I love Cillian Murphy. I'm well in the process of watching Peaky Blinders. I mean, he's in the Batman series as Scarecrow. Cillian Murphy is like one of the best actors. I love him so much. And his character in the second movie just really gives you a lot to think about and gives like you a lot of like added emotional draw that I wasn't really expecting for this character. And it was really nice to see again just the chemistry between the actors on screen.
yeah. All right, so we could bug out about these movies a whole lot, and honestly, if we're not careful, we're going to end up turning this into a
Yep.
just a commentary of the series.
Mm,
But we'll leave this up to you guys in the comments because the two genres that I'm a little anxious about doing a Men Who Talk Their Movies episode on are
mm-hmm.
comedy and horror because those are very difficult things to talk through. If you're talking through the wrong moment, you miss the suspense, or you miss the punchline, or you miss the setup for
Yeah.
the punchline. But I'll leave this up to you guys because we all of us who have seen this movie love it. So let us know below if you'd like us to do an episode of A Quiet Place, and we'll make sure that Caspian's involved in that. All right, so going back to Lee Abbott, I've got a couple of questions for you
Hmm.
about this. What was it
Cool.
originally when you saw the movie that drew you to his character as a strong male character that inspires you?
It was really just there's a lot that happens for this character very quickly when the movie begins. That gives you basically just builds the foundation of your understanding for this family and what their experience is for the rest of the runtime. And it's that opening. Am I allowed to talk about spoilery stuff here on this show? Like, are we okay with
Yeah, we don't
spoilers?
we don't do
Okay. We
spoiler alerts here. If you haven't, it's
okay,
been out
cool.
a couple of
Like
years. If you haven't
we
seen it, get over
we
it.
understand that people are like, if you're here, you've got to have seen the movie, otherwise go see it.
Pretty much.
The opening scene where they're, going through town trying to get supplies and stuff like that, and because they have three kids, they have two sons and a daughter, and one son is very, very young, probably like maybe 4 or 5.
I think he was 4. I was
Okay.
rewatching it this morning up to the point where Lee
Hmm.
dies. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he was 4 years old.
Yeah, and basically what happens in the movie is there's a moment where they're walking back to their home, and again, sound is a trigger for the creatures in this world, and like any sound, not just like loud bombastic noises, but like just small whistles, twigs cracking and stuff like that, everything has to be thought about. And they end up taking a toy from town for the kid. Specifically, the daughter ends up handing it to him because she's like, "Yeah, it's just a toy. You can take it." None of them knew the toy had sound. It's one of those toys that like you press a button or you roll the wheels or something and it starts making noise. And this was a little, I think it was a fire truck or was it an
It, it
ambulance?
was
And
it was
or was it
a
a
space
jet? Was it a
shuttle.
plane? That's what it was. It was a
Yeah.
space shuttle. And it has lights and sirens on it. And it starts going off because he's playing with it. And there's that moment where they all understand that like, oh God, something terrible is about to happen
Hmm.
because they're out exposed in the middle of the trail. Like there's nowhere to run and hide. There's nothing to do. And John's character, Lee, sets down the stuff that he's carrying and just like goes into a dead sprint for his son. And he sees the monster coming out of the peripheral of his vision, and he can see it's literally a race against the things that they're fighting this whole movie. And that last scene where he's almost to his son, and you just see the monster tear across the screen, and the son is gone. And John, first of all, John's face in that scene, Lee's face in that scene is just heart-wrenching. And it just cuts to black after that, and then you get the time skip for it's been like however many months later, like 6 or 7 months later, something like that. Well, more than that actually. I think it's been about 8 months, and Lee is just working on stuff in his basement. He's just basically checking on their homestead and making sure that everything is taken care of. He's working on a little earpiece for his daughter because his daughter is deaf, and he's just going about his business and seeing how somebody has had to deal with that kind of just emotional turmoil and trauma from that experience, and yet he's still the dad, he's still the leader of his family, and he still has to take care of things, and just seeing that he's still going on despite that because he knows he has to in order to keep his family safe, and he doesn't want to let that same thing happen again. That was that was my first really like, okay, I have a lot of respect for this character, and this is the kind of man or father I would want to be in this situation, especially.
Yeah. So what would you say would be like the relationship between Lee's strengths and his weaknesses as like a full. Well, let me actually come back to that because I've got another question. Do you find Lee Abbott to be more of like a realistic, relatable character, or more like this lofty ideal to aspire to?
Realistic and relatable, definitely. It if it were a lofty and like idealistic sort of character, there's really a lack of real flaw in those kinds of characters when they're written. They may have some like minor quirks here and there, but like ultimately they're basically just paragons of like virtue and success and fatherhood and husbandhood and everything like that. But this character really has a very realistic nature in the way that he interacts with his family because he's failed to protect one of his kids, or he feels like, and that's a very realistic experience for anybody to feel like you failed somebody in your life, but he still keeps going. He doesn't mean he's unaffected by that,
Hmm.
but it definitely means that he has his own things that he's working through, and you see that a lot in his relationship with his daughter, because his daughter, who's deaf, also feels very responsible for her brother's death because she's the one that gave him the toy. She can't hear. She didn't even hear when the toy had gone off originally. She didn't know that was going to happen. And so they both have this guilt and remorse for what happened. But Lee's character doesn't really see that in his daughter. What he sees is a girl who's deaf and who has a bit of a handicap when it comes to trying to survive in this world, and he's immensely concerned for her and constantly worried about her. And he's remembering what happened with his son, and really that's a large motivation for what's driving him to keep them all safe, is remembering how he failed and being like, I can't let this happen again. But he doesn't see that his daughter is also dealing with the pain and the sorrow from the guilt associated with what happened to her brother, what happened to Lee's son. And there's a lot of the movie spent with that, with showing you that, because again, Lee's a very realistic, relatable character. Like he's doing what he can to keep them safe. He's a good man, you can tell, but he has his flaws and he has his points where he's blind to what other people are experiencing.
Yeah. And what's interesting about this is like, I mean, he is a very strong character in this
Hmm.
world. I mean, we do see his flaws, and I do agree with you. I think that he is more of a relatable character because, like a lot of guys, he really struggles with that
Hmm.
emotional side. He struggles to understand the hurt that his daughter is going through. He struggles to
Yep.
understand the fear of his son, who's interestingly, I've noticed this before, but I really noticed this morning rewatching. He's kind of the opposite of his dad in a lot of ways, where his
Hmm.
dad is very confident in the world that he's in, and he knows what to do and how to do it. His son is very terrified all of the time,
Yeah.
and where Lee is prepared at a moment's notice to like
Hmm.
ditch everything, his son doesn't get that way until the
Yeah.
second movie.
Hmm.
And so I found that a really interesting contrast because he's trying to raise his son to become at least somewhat of the man that he is, but he
Yeah.
struggles to understand that his son isn't that same person.
Hmm. Yeah. And like you said, in the second movie, we get a lot more of that character development for him specifically. But yeah, in this movie, it's Lee doesn't really see or doesn't really understand as much the fear. He sees the fear is there, but it's more he can't really afford to understand it, he feels like, it seems in the movie, because he has to teach his son how not to be afraid. Because that fear, or at least that kind of extreme fear that his son feels a lot of the time, which is completely understandable, but that kind of extreme fear in this world can get you killed. It can be an unafforded weakness in Lee's mind. And so that's why you get the whole scene where he takes his son to the waterfall, which is a great scene
Oh, it's one of the
because
best in the
he's
movie.
exactly like, and him just explaining like, we're safe here. Like there's nothing can hear us because the waterfall, like he says, little sounds are okay if there's a bigger sound that masks them. And that natural sound of the water, the creatures aren't drawn to because they know that that's a natural sound.
Mhm.
And Lee is a very realistic character for me, and in a lot of ways, I understand him and relate to him. Like he's way stronger than I am, and just as a character is a very noble and honorable kind of person. Uh, but yeah, definitely realistic.
Yeah. All right. So as we wrap up here, because I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this up, we're going to try to keep these segments fairly short and
Cool.
save the longer videos for the
Hmm.
actual movie watch throughs that we do.
Yeah.
But what would you say are to our younger audience who's watching, who's trying to look up to someone? Maybe they don't necessarily have a good
Hmm.
male figure in their lives they can look up to. What would you say are 2 to 3 qualities that are worth looking up to in Lee's character?
Two, two or three qualities. Oh, I have to pick and decide. Um, so definitely for one is uh, courage, and not just not just courage that's like, oh, I'm brave and I can do things. I'm never afraid. But no, the ability to keep going despite fear. Because Lee is very much afraid in this movie. He's afraid that something's going to happen to his daughter, something's going to happen to his son, his wife who is pregnant. Like he very much feels that fear, but it's that fear that drives him to keep going. And it's when we're afraid that we really discover like what kind of people we are and what kind of people we want to be. And that courage that comes in those moments is something that is learned and is something that you have to practice at, because nobody really naturally feels courage when we're afraid. Our normal reaction is to either, fight it tooth and nail or run away. And Lee allows that fear to give him the motivation to do what he needs to do to be smart about how to protect his family and how to stay safe in that world. Another one I think would be the willingness to listen, because Lee is not the kind of character who just does things and doesn't take other people's opinions or feelings into consideration. Just because he doesn't see what they're going through in the moment doesn't mean he's not willing to listen, because he has a conversation with his son where his son tells him, he was like, you need to talk to her, meaning, his sister, Lee's daughter. You need to tell her, that you love her and that you're not mad at her because she thinks that he's angry with her because of what happened to his son. And that's not the case. It's just that he's afraid the same thing will happen. And he listens to him. There's something to be said for the willingness to listen to the people around you, to be able to empathize. Having that empathy is a big thing, to actually relate to the people around you. Um, so yeah, that courage and that empathy, willingness to listen. And then, man, I have to pick something else. Um, Honestly, the sacrifice, because there are moments in our lives where, everyone has to give up a little bit of something for somebody else. Whether that is your time because somebody needs you and they're in a bad moment and they need someone to be there, you may have to give up your time. Maybe sometimes it's giving something up that you have. Maybe it's, using your resources, your money in some way to help somebody else. Sometimes you have to sacrifice something for the people you love around you. And that's also not really a natural thing, I would say. Like maybe for the people closest to us in our lives, we're willing to go the extra mile for, but for a lot of people who depend on us, it's also a very learned skill of being able to give of yourself so that somebody else can benefit, so that somebody else can be better. And we see that with Lee throughout the entire movie, and especially at the ending of the movie where he literally gives his life so that his kids survive. And he's showing them in that moment that he loves them because he wants them to understand that I'm doing this because I love you, because I want you to have the chance. And that kind of sacrifice, again, isn't like an inherent thing. That isn't like an innate trait to humanity. It's something that you very much have to be taught and you very much have to learn, and you have to have people to look to learn that through. So, yeah, that courage, the empathy, and the willingness to sacrifice is are the three things that I would think probably most characterize Lee Abbott and are probably the most worth looking at and observing.
100% agree, my friend. Well, I want to thank you for coming on and for doing this, and also thank you for actually having good taste in movies.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for having wonderful taste in movies too.
Oh, you're welcome, friend. It comes naturally. All right, thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you guys very soon. Peace out. Bye.
Bye.